my name is Jung Liu, Group Product Marketing Manager at Okta, and you are listening to the Meet Your Okta Identity Expert podcast, a series of podcasts where we bring Okta's professional service experts to share their experiences and knowledge of how they've managed our customers' identity in this online world. I have been with Okta for 3.5 years and focused on customer experience for over 10 years. I'm one of our subject matter experts for customer identity and access management. For today's podcast, we'll be speaking on how customers leverage our API products to build seamless customer experiences. With that, I'd like to welcome Okta's Services Architect, Daniel Marma. Hi, Dan. Welcome.
Thanks for inviting me to Meet the Expert series.
Great. Maybe as a starting point here, Dan, if you could tell us a little about your background and how you came to Okta.
I'm part of the Customer First team at Okta located in the Northeast. I've been with Okta for 3 years, been involved with platform development for over 2 decades in the different platform technology roles ranging from support services, product management, and business analyst sides, to the deep immersion into technologies in roles such as platform consultant, development, and architect. I came to Okta to become part of a bigger picture with a huge growth potential where I really get to dig in and become part of the catalyst of change.
So in those past 3 years, can you tell us a bit more about the number and types of customers that you've helped?
I've never really counted the number of customers I've implemented at Okta, but I have to say it would be in the hundreds. It seems like 5 to 10 customers per week pass by my desk in one contact or another. I do weekly stand-ups with our consultants and architects across all regions to provide guidance and current blockers and discover new situations.
So it sounds like there's really a wide variety of scenarios that you see, probably ranging in complexity. Can you give a few examples of some of the things you've worked on?
As you would imagine, the complexity of these solutions really vary depending on the audience and size and their required security posture. I've worked protecting bill payment systems, delivery of consumer products, dynamic research labs, and online banking applications, even government agencies.
Wow, definitely a wide range right there. What in your background makes you the Okta identity guru that our customers trust?
My educational background was straddled between computer sciences and business administrations and marketing. Let's say, before that was a thing. Over the decades, I've expanded from C++ programming to Java, PHP, JavaScript, and Python, etc. At this point, since I don't code daily, however, I don't turn down the opportunity to do a code review. I'm even a cardholder of the current Okta certifications, such as Okta Certified Professional, Okta Certified Administrator, and the Okta Certified Consultant.
So you were definitely ahead of the game, mixing computer sciences as well as business administrations. Definitely something I wished I had done in my educational background. So Dan, what area would you say you have the greatest depth and breadth of knowledge? What types of scenarios do you see amongst our customers where you are really able to add a lot of value?
Taking very complex technology workflows and integrations and making them invisible to the end user. For example, let's take a payment gateway from an electric company. We were allowed to extend the portal to allow candidates to apply for a position and get immediate access to their accounts to be able to verify that the application was confirmed and they were able to proceed.
And what was the kind of software structure? What did the technology stack look like there?
Well, let's say we didn't go with the original plan. The original plan included the connection of the HCM that did not have any SSO, the Okta who knew nothing about the platform or the job applicant to be able to communicate with each other. Unfortunately, the original plan was quoted to take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to get the appropriate user objects in place. However, by leveraging Okta's error page and a single page app, we were able to just in time verify the user's account, set them up into the appropriate systems, and authenticate them directly into the platform, which went from the estimated 15-20 minutes to get the user sync in place to a matter of seconds.
So it sounds like you were really able to help them navigate the path from moving from legacy technology with its kind of inherent slowness there to more of some modern application development with a single page application.
Yes, it definitely was a great first impression to a job applicant. There's never been a situation where management would accept the excuse it was too complicated or there's been too many things needed to happen to facilitate the onboarding of users. I have to keep that front end simple and let the system do the heavy lifting. I like to use the analogy of my grandfather's workshop. My grandfather would tell me, don't push down on the blade, let the weight of the saw do the work, and let the teeth cut the wood. You would get a much cleaner, smoother cut in that case. If you tried to push down too hard, the wood would splinter and you would potentially break your tool. So many different lessons can be made in woodworking.
I like that analogy a lot, and I like the personal element as well. I think it relates very well to customer identity, especially as we're thinking about the evolution and the explosion of devices and technology that are available to people. Simplicity and creating that frictionless experience really go hand in hand in those scenarios. I want to get a little bit more into your experiences in particular around cloud identity. I kind of wanted to first dig in a little bit more into you yourself, Dan. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in your spare time outside of work to keep your mind sharp?
Well, of course. I just read identity blogs and security reports nonstop. Just kidding. I spend most of my time focused on my kids. I split between different sporting events from volleyball, football, lacrosse, crew, and I can't believe it, squash. My wife spearhead the tailgating at the events. I'm involved with the Educational Foundation as a board member, where we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've even built applications for them to facilitate a silent auction. In fact, I've leveraged our own Okta for Good to provision Office 365 and Google so that I didn't have to be involved with every single technology question. I have to say, it's been very rewarding to provide such an impact to my community.
That's very impressive. We always say always on when it talks about our infrastructure, but it sounds like you are always on as well, always thinking about Okta even in your time off.
Not true, but I do some other things. I go to dinner. I like food.
That's great. Okay, so getting back into specifically some of the engagements that you have, what is it about identity or the cloud in particular what about that challenge do you find interesting?
Well, I feel like I can be solving real world problems. Going back to that buzzword, digital transformation, I can feel part of that metaphorical wave. Plus, it's something tangible, something that I can see in my daily life. For example, that electric bill that you just paid, I helped protect that. Or that online banking transaction, it was something that I was helped protecting against the bad guys.
I really like that point because digital transformation is a buzzword, but it's oftentimes very nebulous. A lot of people want to embark on a journey of digital transformation, but they don't know how to make it tangible and they don't know how to start and what to tackle first. So when you're working with customers, what are some of the key obstacles that you see them facing?
Well, the biggest and first thing that you need to talk about is onboarding. That not only getting the users into the system, but that changeover, it's critical and can determine the overall success of the program. Being transparent in this process is actually a good thing. You don't want folks to know that anything is occurring behind the scenes. We always get the starting Monday, want everybody to be authenticating via Okta, and away we go. Talking about that transformation, we also think about greenfield applications. We have a new application that we want to deploy. Those are actually the easy ones. It's the ones, the legacy applications that have been out for decades that we need to transform and get them into the same authentication or the same access levels of these new apps. A lot of these apps don't even have active development staff in play. They don't follow any standards. They have no SAML or OADC. Even the premise of OADC and SAML wasn't even around when they came about. So they sit behind these load balancers or proxies, and some of them still require user ID and password to get in.
Those are definitely some challenges that we oftentimes see. But, when you start putting some of these things together, you end up with really complex scenarios. Are there certain use cases end to end that you see on a regular basis?
Yeah, so one good one is, or that example is when a customer has multiple applications. Hey, we've been doing mass merger and acquisitions over the last few years, and we have 5 different disparate applications. We want them to be able to now use a single login, a single way to get access to everything. So navigating through those waters is always a fun process, and where we can help out with having the experience of doing it a few times.
All right, Dan, so we talked a little bit here about what it looks like from an organization's perspective. Another angle that we see is that customer expectations are constantly evolving. And especially as we move forward in terms of technology, their expectations are very, very high. They expect seamless omni-channel experiences. They expect their information and data to be secure and their privacy to be respected. How do you see identity fitting into solving the customer's expectations and concerns?
Well, let's face it, the user's identity is in the center of all these applications. That said, we have customers who store very minimal obfuscated user profiles to some that have incredibly verbose profiles, from everything from their shirt size to where they last ate dinner. And then, especially with the introduction of GDPR, it's causing some really heated conversations in the planning rooms. What used to be a room full of technologists, architects, and consultants is becoming more business operators, security officers, and in even some cases lawyers to interpret what does that compliance actually mean. So Okta Identity Cloud can be hosted in the Americas or in EMEA, Asia Pac, as needed to comply with these rules within the continental boundaries of Europe on a FedRAMP or HIPAA certified AWS environment. With all these compliance requirements and regulations that are out there, Okta can put you into the appropriate environment if you need to be FedRAMP or HIPAA, or you're not as conscientious or have those requirements. We can put you into the appropriate environment.
You know, there's this historical notion that security and compliance are really kind of the enemies of usability. What are your thoughts on that notion?
Well, you really don't have to compromise on either front. It doesn't have to be more secure and less user-friendly. With our well-thought-out approach, we can offer both a great mix of security and usability. For example, leveraging some of the interfaces that we have, we can use some legacy systems, let's say the CAS or a Shibboleth, and front-end them the same way we would to a single-page app that was just built last week. We just did this for a customer who had 3 disparate web-based portals to a single interface that would not only span across these 3 legacy systems that had probably about 100 to 150 microservices. They were migrating to a Salesforce.com CRM tool where they wanted to offer a mobile device. This application was going to be shared across some big box retailers. They needed to be onboarded just in time to offer a better and more consistent experience across the organization. And we were able to do this by providing a single interface where they didn't have to change and retrofit all these old applications. We were able to put them side by side with the new technology.
Oh, interesting. So in that way, your customers then have some sort of semblance that they have access to all of the old resources that they have, but at the same time, they're being seamlessly introduced into new services that might be on a number of different devices. Now, one thing you said there, Dan, definitely piqued my interest. You talked about the addition of new stakeholders, especially with security and privacy concerns, bringing in perhaps security officers, lawyers, business operations team into the discussion. That's definitely a trend that we see here a lot as well. And, some of the key stakeholders that we've seen brought into the conversation around customer identity who may not have historically been in it are folks like, your CMO or a line of business owner, because a lot of these customer identity projects often impact revenue. Additionally, we see the rise of engineering teams and developers that are called upon to build out these experiences. And increasingly, these teams are having increasing influence over the decisions around the technology stack. How do you approach the challenges of dealing with these various audiences? What are maybe some of the key questions that you recommend to customers to ask or think about before engaging in a strategy to solve the needs of these different users?
Well, we go with the KISS approach. Keep it simple, Sam. So many folks have this notion of trying to build these monolithic applications and try to bite off the entire integration in this whole process, this whole project. I start every design session with the philosophy of breaking down into the picture into 4 components. First, the provisioning piece. How are we going to get the users into the universal directory? Second is that the authentication, the credentialing of the individual. How do we know who they are? And the third is that assertion into the application, or maybe it's an API, or it's over to another system. That fourth piece, it really comes down to that application. Maybe there's an additional provisioning component there. But once we break it down into those simple bite-sized pieces, it becomes much more simplistic and we're able to leverage some economies of scale.
Great. And then, so as you're working with the customer throughout kind of the journey of a new customer that's come on board to Okta, do you focus on different things in perhaps, the different phases of how you interface with them?
Yes, this whole process reverberates through our customer first playbook. From our first meetings, we'll assess opportunities for you to learn. We'll see where there's opportunities for you to get the appropriate training to get up to speed with the identity space or being able to manage the system as go forward. As we move into the deploy phase, we have architectural workshops where we talk about how we're going to integrate between the systems and plan appropriately, which will get us into the framework of where we get into adoption. We build out the appropriate framework for you to run with that metaphorical approach. As more applications come online, your team has a game plan on how to adopt and grow.
So I like hearing the customer first playbook. Maybe to make that a little bit more tangible for our audience, could you give us an example of how you have worked with a customer in a customer identity project? And as a starting point, maybe can you describe the scenario before they engaged us?
Sure. The customer started off with two portals. One was going to be the consumer-based portal, and there was also a retailer where the resellers and such can access information about their products. More of a order management system and such. The consumer side was really focused on getting just information about the products and allowing folks to research and decide, hey, I want to buy this thing. And also feed that metaphorical marketing machine so that they can get the appropriate information about interests and market accordingly.
What was the marketing platform that they were using?
Well, they had a SAP back end for both environments, but the front end was more informational and the back end was really around customer order management and tracking. What the interesting part was is they were going on to add a third portal. The third portal was the SAP Hybris, which allows them to get more contextual with their catalog presentation. Maybe there's pricing guides and such that are already in place for those partners. So it became incredibly critical to be able to assert identity because that would impact bottom line. Your partner A and you have a pricing agreement that gave you something that was different than off the street partner.
So what were they looking for Okta to do in that context?
Well, Okta was able to provide a single identity that goes across all three platforms, but also be able to have a consistent user profile, user credential into each of them. It also afforded them the ability to offer things such as members or partners would be able to leverage the consumer product just to be able to, hey, they want to do some research. They wanted to be able to have that same user experience as their consumers and tie that back into orders.
So from an implementation standpoint, can you walk through how you approached the problem with the customer?
Oh, yes. We started with that onboarding, that registration process. We had two registration pages. One would be for the consumer, would be much more focused on the marketing profile, let's say some basic information. And then the other registration page or onboarding flow would be through the partner portal, which would do some verification of, hey, they do have a partnership and this is what their relationship is with the firm. Once that was established, they both use the same universal directory. We use a series of groups and applications. Depending on who they were, they would be asserted accordingly. So at the end of the day, they only needed to integrate the applications once, and they got both audiences in the appropriate context.
Got it. So it sounds like, a whole set of different requirements for different audiences of these two portals. Can you talk a little bit more about what the development process looked like for registration as well as sign-on?
Well, it was really more of a configuration than a major development effort. By leveraging the sign-on widget, it was really a matter of deciding where does that thing need to go. Maybe it's in multiple places for the user experience aspect. But the reality was they really just needed to go swap out that native login that was there previously with the ability to accept the Java Web Token or OIDC launch or OIDC flow.
Got it. So it sounds like they were really interested in ensuring the developer efficiency so that they were using the out of the box workflows that we already have around authentication and registration, all with our widget that they then customized for their own look and feel.
So in full disclosure, there's several customers that are consolidating their consumer and partner portals into a single place. Using Okta, it is just a matter of setting up application profiles and being able to assert their identity.
I think that's really interesting. And, one of the things we were just talking about there is what is the level of development effort and how much efficiency and agility do you want to provide to your developers? I think fundamentally as companies shift to building out these experiences natively, they start to become more and more of a technology company themselves with in-house development teams that resemble more of a technology company in terms of, how they develop out software. And so as part of that, companies are pursuing modern trends, things like the API economy. And you had also mentioned microservices as well in a prior response. What are some of the challenges that you've seen for companies as they move to this more and more of a modern approach?
So without the experience of just building APIs to facilitate the application flows, we really have to get involved with teaching them how to leverage APIs in general and then how to protect them as well. Using the standards such as OAuth can really bring them up to speed quickly and modernize their application, giving them the platform to not only address some of those web-based applications that they're concerned about today, but get them into a position that, a few months from now when they ask to go into a mobile app, they're already in the proper stance. For example, right now I'm working with a government agency where we're building a development lab that would be a series of APIs. When complete, we'll enforce varying levels of trust to the capabilities of the integrated applications. Implemented correctly, this could revolutionize the way our government builds applications because, they won't. The private sector does, and the government agency will just be able to be a consumer themselves.
I really like that. And actually, it brings me back to one of our customers that we had speak at Octane. It's the U.S. Digital Services. And so what's interesting about them, and actually Obama mentioned them as well during his fireside chat with Todd, is that, historically, the government gets a bad rap for not thinking about modern technology. And they've implemented this agency, which is really around bringing folks from the private sector over to the public sector for maybe a couple years to do a stint in terms of modernizing technology with the idea that they'll eventually move back to the private sector. So it's a kind of a cool scenario where you have folks, or you have that cross-pollination happening. So continuing on with that, I think we always like to talk about, the new hot technology, microservices as an example. But you mentioned earlier that the reality is a lot of companies are going to have legacy on-prem technology, and they're going to have to function in a hybrid environment. And this is difficult for customers because how do you prioritize moving forward on modern technology versus moving off of legacy technology? What are maybe some of the best practices or advice that you provide to our customers?
Well, don't judge my age on this, but I've been in the technology space for over 30 years. I've spent plenty of time managing my own infrastructure, so I'm glad to move away from that arena. As we talked before, the old technology can really throttle the access to the new. Getting the right guidance, we remove that friction, identify efficiencies and best practices. That said, in the last month, every customer I spoke to was talking about removing that on-prem dependency. What can I move to the cloud? What can Okta host for me so I don't have to manage any more infrastructure? My advice, get some services involved early. You state your desires, where you want to go. We architect a solution that will get you there. We try to work with trying to leverage just customizations and minimize the development effort.
If a customer did want to proceed with getting services involved early, what are some suggestions about how they could do that?
Let's use an example. Just this past week, I had a day-long design workshop with a firm that was proposed to have 3 different provisioning interfaces. This would push users into different regions. Some in Europe to address GDPR, some in Asia Pac because they had some additional regulatory requirements, and then the Americas. By having the workshop, we were able to leverage a single interface that would move the users into the appropriate organizations via configuration. We no longer had to build a custom interface to the provisioning service. The customer was both elated and upset at the same time. They just wanted us to get involved earlier. This is where Okta's expert services in the customer first team can bring the experience to the design table.
Great. Thanks, Dan, for that description and for really highlighting why services are important in terms of helping our customers understand the problems that you see on a day-to-day basis. So in closing, I'd like to summarize some of the items that we've learned from Dan today. First, apparently Dan likes Okta so much that he implements it even when he's not on the job. Secondly, as we've heard, transforming the customer experience is oftentimes correlated with digital transformation. It's an initiative that many companies of all sizes and verticals are pursuing. However, adopting modern technology and identity is critical to the success of these initiatives. Additionally, these initiatives tend to span a number of different audiences. We heard about a few scenarios here where consumer portals were being merged with partner portals, or scenarios where consumer portals require the same back-end services that might traditionally be in an employee type of use case. So as a result, there are a lot of big, hairy problems that you need to solve along the way. So things like balancing legacy technology versus moving quickly on adopting modern technology, to perhaps understanding best practices architecture for the unique use cases that our customers have. And so in these scenarios, engaging experts like Dan early on led to better results all around. We have seen customers with a variety of problems across use cases. And so leveraging that knowledge, folks like Dan can really help organizations design compelling, frictionless, and secure customer experiences. Dan, thank you again for joining us today and sharing some of your experiences and advice. To our audiences, thank you for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for another session of Meet Your Okta Identity Expert podcast.